Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eylon Levy, Israeli government spokesman. This is day 52 of the war with Hamas's army of terror. First, some important updates about the release of our hostages from Gaza, and then we'll gladly take your questions. An update from just the last hour. Earlier today, the Prime Minister visited the ruins of Kfar Aza with SpaceX and Twitter owner Eylon Musk. The Prime Minister showed Mr. Musk the evidence of Hamas's atrocities there on October 7th, when Hamas death squads invaded and massacred as many people as they could, as brutally as they could, and then abducted civilians as hostage back into the Gaza Strip. Mr. Musk was also briefed by the acting head of the Sha'ar HaNegev Regional Council, Yossi Keren, and a representative of the IDF spokesperson's unit about the massacre there. The Prime Minister and Mr. Musk visited the ruins of the home of the late Ophir Libstein, the former head of the local regional council, who was murdered in October 7th during a gunfight with the death squads that invaded Kibbutz Kfar Aza, and Mr. Musk heard about the late Mr. Libstein's heroic efforts to fend off the terrorists. The Prime Minister then took Mr. Musk to the Itamari family household, where Mr. Musk heard about the family's horrific story and the murder of Ro'i and Smadar Idan, whose 4-year-old daughter, Abigail, we're glad to say was released from Hamas captivity yesterday. The Prime Minister and Mr. Musk also visited the youth quarter of the kibbutz, which absorbed most of the fire on October 7th, and the images from that visit are being distributed by the government press office. Today is day 4 of the hostage release pause. This morning, the Prime Minister's office and the coordinator for the hostages and missing persons updated that discussions are currently being held surrounding the list of hostages to be released that was received overnight. All relevant security and government officials are evaluating that list, and additional information will be provided in due course. Yesterday, 17 individuals were released from Hamas captivity, including 14 Israeli nationals and 3 foreign nationals. That list included 9 children. 6 of them had at least one parent murdered on October 7th and are returning to broken homes. One of them, little Abigail Idan, who turned 4 yesterday, I believe, day before yesterday as a hostage, was orphaned. Both of her parents, Ro'i and Smadar Idan, were slaughtered on October 7th. The names of the hostages released yesterday are as follows: Abigail Idan, aged 4, Hagar Broduch, 40, Ofri Broduch, 10, Yuval Broduch, 8, Oriya Broduch, age 4. Chen Goldstein Almog, 49, Agam Goldstein Almog, age 17, Gal Goldstein Almog, age 11, Tal Goldstein Almog, 9, Alma Avraham, 84, Adrienne Aviva Siegel, 62, Ella Eliakim, 8, Daphna Eliakim, 14, and Roni Kriboy, the joint Russian-Israeli national, aged 25. The Prime Minister spoke last night with our good friend US President Joe Biden. He mentioned, of course, it is a joy that Abigail Idan, a joint US-Israeli citizen whose image became iconic of Hamas's abduction of Israeli civilians on October 7th, is back with us. On the other hand, however, that happiness is mellowed by the fact that she is returning to a reality that she is an orphan and will have to be raised by her extended family. The framework remains in place for the release of more hostages after tonight's batch, providing an additional 1 day of hostage release pause for every 10 additional hostages who are released. Last week, the government approved a prospective list of 300 Palestinian violent criminals in Israeli jails for release under this framework. Under the agreed 3-for-1 ratio, that would allow for another 5 days of a hostage release pause for another 50 hostages, should Hamas agree to release those people from captivity. And we will, of course, welcome that and are continuing to make every effort to get our hostages back from Gaza. At the same time, the Prime Minister told President Biden what he told soldiers during an earlier visit to the Gaza Strip. Those images also released through the GPO when the Prime Minister visited one of those exposed tunnels. When Hamas stops releasing hostages under the existing framework, Israel will return to realizing our 3 goals with full force: eliminating Hamas, ensuring that Gaza never again pose a threat to the people of Israel, and of course, releasing all of our hostages. Our hearts are with the freed hostages, but our minds are, of course, first and foremost with those still being held cruelly by Hamas without access to the Red Cross, in sheer violation of any standard of humanity. Israel remains committed to that pledge. There will be no one left behind. None of us are free till all of them are free. There are still currently around 184 people still being held hostage by Hamas since October 7th. In that number are 14 foreigners and also another 80 Israelis with foreign dual citizenship. There are 4 abductees currently in Gaza, predating October 7th. Of course, Hadar Goldin, Oron Shaul from the 2014 war, Avera Mengistu, Hisham Assayed. We remember them. We're making efforts to bring them home as well. To date, 40 Israelis and another 18 foreigners have been released. We will continue to apply full military pressure on Hamas to release the women and the men, the children and the old, the civilians and the soldiers. Every minute that Hamas continues to hold our hostages in the dark and to keep their families in the dark about their fate is an ongoing and unforgivable crime against humanity. Yesterday, the Director General of the Prime Minister's Office, Yossi Shelley, visited the Shamir Medical Center, which has treated 14 Thai nationals and 1 Filipino national returning from Hamas captivity. The Director General was accompanied by the Ambassador of Thailand to Israel and representatives from the IDF and the Shamir Medical Center. Now, an operational update as part of the hostage release pause. Yesterday, Sunday, COGAT, the Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, coordinated the entry of 200 trucks into the Gaza Strip, 42 of which were loaded with shelter equipment. We remain committed to what we've been saying consistently from the very beginning. We want to see humanitarian aid reach the people of Gaza, the civilians who need it, in a way that makes sure that Hamas can't steal it. This happened with the approval of the government of Israel, of course, in accordance with the agreement with the United States and in coordination with Egypt and the United Nations. As of yesterday, November 26th, 226 trucks loaded with shelter equipment have been transferred to the Gaza Strip. This is part of the ongoing humanitarian aid being delivered via international organizations through the Rafah border crossing, having first been checked by Israel at the Nitzana crossing, and Israel has more than doubled its capabilities to inspect those trucks and make sure that the international community's goodwill is not being exploited by Hamas to rearm and refuel. As part of this aid, some 3,600 tons of tents, blankets and mattresses have been transferred for the civilian population ahead of winter. Over 2,000 trucks have entered the Gaza Strip since the start of the war, transferring water, food and medical equipment, water of course continuing to flow through the existing water pipes from Israeli territory. Yesterday, the IDF confirmed a significant strike in Gaza against Hamas 2 weeks ago, despite Hamas's attempts to hide the outcome. The IDF killed 5 senior Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Each played an active and key role in the army of terror that was dedicated to those terror atrocities against Israeli civilians and were central partners in the October 7th massacre. Some of the numbers: since declaring war on Israel with the October 7th massacre, Hamas has fired over 11,000 rockets at Israel. There have been more than 1,300 failed launches from Palestinian terrorist groups that have landed inside the Gaza Strip and hit property and taken lives inside Gaza. Of course, most famously, the Islamic Jihad rocket shrapnel that hit the car park of the Al-Ahli hospital. I saw just now Human Rights Watch has confirmed that according to its own investigation, that was indeed not an Israeli airstrike, and that issue can be put to rest. Over 1,200 Israelis were killed in the massacre. Over 9,038 Israelis have been injured since the war began. That is, of course, a conservative estimate. Those numbers, sadly, are expected to change. The IDF has notified the families of 392 soldiers that their loved ones fell in battle, as well as 59 fallen members of the police forces. That brings us to the end of today's operational update, and we'll take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Questions?
We have questions through the Zoom.
Yeah. In the event of the pause is not extended, when does it expire? Tonight? Midnight?
The campaign to end Hamas and bring our hostages home will resume immediately with the end of the hostage release pause. I'm not going to speculate, obviously, about the exact operational movements of our troops and the continuation of that strategy. But Hamas is on notice. That option for an extension is open. We want to receive another additional 50 hostages beyond tonight, on our way to bringing everyone home. And as soon as that framework expires, Israel will continue with full force towards those three objectives: eliminating Hamas, making sure the Gaza Strip can never be a security threat to Israel, and releasing all the hostages. It is, of course, Israel's military pressure that has brought Hamas to bear to agree to release those hostages. We've had it begging for a breather because it's been clobbered over the last month, and that pressure will continue until we get everyone home. And then beyond, to continue to remove Hamas from power.
Can you please repeat the number of how many hostages are still in Gaza?
At the moment, we're talking about approximately 184 hostages from the October 7th massacre. But I'll remind you, we still have missing persons as well.
Question from Adam Bellos. You can unmute yourself. Okay. Can't hear. That's it.
I'm not sure they can unmute themselves. You may have to take a typed question.
Okay. Adam, if you could put your question in the chat, please.
Do we have any questions from the room in the meanwhile? If not, we'll continue with the Zoom. Anything else in the chat?
Yeah. How many of the... One second. How many of the 184 are Israeli, and how many US citizens? And also, please, how many foreigners?
We said earlier there are still approximately 184 people still being held hostage by Hamas without access to the Red Cross since October 7th. In that number are 14 foreign nationals and 80 Israelis with foreign citizenship. Those are the current figures that we have.
Question, can you please let us know whether Elon Musk was invited or he came of his own volition?
I have nothing to update beyond the update we had earlier.
And is there any comment on the Starlink deal?
No, I'm not familiar with the question.
Okay, from Gwen Ackerman. So the issue is that Israel still doesn't have Hamas's agreement for an extension, or that although it has voiced that it wants an extension, it hasn't met conditions?
The framework that was agreed by the government last week facilitated a 4-day hostage release pause for the release of the first 50 hostages, mainly women and children, and all women and children under that agreement. And we want to see the second stage of that agreement go into place to the extent that Hamas is interested to release more hostages. I've seen the reports that Hamas says that it can't locate all of them. That is, of course, horrific, beyond measure and beyond comment. And we expect, if Hamas is interested in extending that hostage release pause in exchange for an additional pause in the fighting, to get the list of the names it is wanting to release. And I'll emphasize, these are people Hamas could release now. Hamas could have released little baby Kfir Bibas, who is only 10 months old, today, yesterday, on day 1 of the hostage release pause, at any point since the October 7th massacre. And the fact that Hamas continues to hold these people incommunicado and to hold these little babies hostage is an ongoing crime against humanity. And of course, we demand that Hamas release all of them and expect to see the names of the people it wants to release if it is interested in having that pause extended. And of course, we want to get everyone home.
Question from KRM News. How many will be released today? We heard there was some disagreement on the list.
As we said earlier, the list of the prospective hostages who are lined up for release has been received. There are currently discussions being held about that list that was received overnight. The information is being evaluated. When we have additional information, we will, of course, provide that in due course. And, of course, we'll provide those names once they are safely back in Israeli territory.
Question from Adam Bellos. Is there any comment on the new video from Fatah claiming to be involved in the October the 7th massacre?
I'm not familiar with the footage that Mr. Bellos is referring to.
Okay. Shoshana Solomon asks, how many of the hostages are American and dual Israeli Americans, please?
I don't want to throw out a number just off the wing off a number, so I'll circle back to you. Abigail Edan is a joint US-Israeli citizen, as far as I'm aware, the first, but I don't want to commit on that, so we will get back to you.
Great, that's all.
Okay, that's all. Thank you, everyone. Keep safe. Thank you.